In the sunlit waters off the Caribbean coast, where pleasure liners once traced carefree loops between islands, a darker story was waiting. The MS Monarch, once hailed as a jewel of modern cruising, carried with it more than just passengers and baggage. From the moment it touched the water, the ship seemed marked. A series of tragic events would shadow its decades at sea: mysterious deaths, catastrophic failures, and a grim end at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. For Maritime Mishaps, this is a deeper dive into the ill-fated voyage of the MS Monarch, a story not of a single disaster, but of a vessel dogged by a curse it never seemed able to outrun. A tale of opulence turned to omen, of loss at sea and slow decay, and the strange, silent toll a ship can take across the years, built for a king. The MS Monarch, originally conceived as the Monarch of the Seas, was a large passenger vessel registered in Oslo, Norway. Designed with 2 watertight compartments for safety, the ship had an impressive gross tonnage and was capable of carrying more than 2,500 passengers, supported by a crew of over 800. Construction of the ship began in 1989, and it was built under the supervision of a respected classification society known for ensuring the seaworthiness and safety of commercial vessels. The ship's main propulsion system featured 4 engines, each generating 7,500 horsepower, giving it a total power output of over 20,000 kilowatts. This powerful machinery allowed the vessel to reach speeds of up to 19.5 knots. In emergency conditions, the ship could come to a full stop from top speed within just over a kilometer, and slightly less when operating at half speed. 2 propellers and an additional pair of bow thrusters provided enhanced control and maneuverability. Managed by Royal Caribbean International out of Miami, Florida, the ship operated under a Norwegian company structure through Anders Wilhelmsen and Company in Oslo. As part of international safety compliance, Monarch of the Seas held a passenger ship safety certificate for international voyages issued by Norwegian maritime authorities. This certificate required it to be equipped with life-saving gear for as many as 3,600 individuals. Though outfitted with the most essential navigation systems and modern amenities, the ship's early days were marked by a significant setback. While still being finished at sea in 1990, a fire broke out due to welding equipment, severely damaging the bow section. The destruction was so extensive that there was initial doubt as to whether repairs were even feasible. Over the years, the Monarch became a well-known fixture in the cruise industry, offering a variety of leisure activities for passengers. It featured an outdoor basketball court, shuffleboard areas, and later, a rock climbing wall, which was added during a major renovation in 2003. This refit also included expanded facilities for children, as well as updates to the onboard fitness center and spa. Before being retired from Royal Caribbean International's fleet, the ship regularly sailed from Port Canaveral, Florida, to destinations in the Bahamas, serving thousands of vacationers with each journey. Not all of these journeys were smooth sailing, however. In fact, the MS Monarch is now more infamous for the journeys it didn't complete without incident. 2 of these events were undoubtedly the main catalysts to its inevitable grounding, scrapping, and placement among the legends of maritime's disasters. In the early hours of December 15, 1998, just after midnight, the cruise ship Monarch of the Seas arrived near Great Bay, off the coast of San and Martin. Originally scheduled to sail from St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands to Martinique, the ship had veered off its planned route to drop off a passenger in need of urgent medical attention. Upon reaching the designated meeting point, the sick passenger was transferred to shore by boat, accompanied by the ship's doctor and nurse. While the vessel awaited the return of its medical staff, it drifted freely about 0.4 nautical miles south of Fort Amsterdam. By around 1:25 a.m., the doctor and nurse had returned, and the ship's captain personally took the helm. He adjusted the ship's course to 160 degrees true, aiming to pass to the east of Proselyte Reef. This decision was based primarily on the captain's visual judgment and confirmation from the ship's second officer, who was serving as the officer of the watch. The ODW had relied on data from the automatic radar plotting aid, which calculated that the vessel would stay roughly 0.3 nautical miles clear of the reef's lighted buoy, a margin they believed to be safe. The captain chose this route partly to avoid an outbound sailboat positioned just ahead of the Monarch near the reef's buoy. However, no one on board took the time to carefully establish the vessel's exact location before changing course. The route was not drawn on the navigation chart. and the 160-degree heading had not been part of the ship's official voyage plan. Worst of all, the navigation chart in use had not been updated to reflect the buoy's corrected position. At the time of departure, the bridge was staffed with the captain, staff captain, a second officer, the on-duty helmsman, and an experienced off-duty helmsman temporarily assisting. Around 1:28 a.m., after confirming the 160-degree course with the OOW, who assured him that the ship was 3 cables off from the buoy and in a safe position, the captain handed over control and exited the bridge. Though the captain briefly returned to check on the situation, he soon left again, confident that everything was proceeding smoothly. Meanwhile, the staff captain, who was preoccupied with bringing the engines up to speed, did not participate in navigating, though he privately questioned the unusual choice to pass east of the reef. The O, who had limited experience at sea and had never passed by Proselyte Reef at night, nor from that particular direction, checked the vessel's position. He did not factor in the effect of wind and current pushing the ship westward. The plan was to steer 160 degrees until the ship passed the buoy, then adjust to 190 degrees true, eventually aiming for a 180-degree heading toward Martinique. Shortly before the scheduled course change, the OOW received a phone call about a passenger complaint regarding noise near their cabin. As he was handling that, an automatic smoke alarm briefly went off on the bridge. The lookout checked it and reset the alarm. Almost immediately after ending the phone call, the OBU spotted the buoy abeam to starboard, both visually and on radar. Relying solely on ARPA's assessment that the ship was 3 cables from the buoy, he ordered a turn to starboard and a new course of 190 degrees. No visual measurements or other navigational checks were made to verify the ship's position. At approximately 1:30 a.m., just as the ship began its turn, the Monarch struck Proselyte Reef while traveling at about 12 knots. Although the ship did not become permanently grounded, the impact caused serious damage. The master rushed back to the bridge, took command, and quickly discovered water flooding multiple tanks and watertight sections, causing the ship's bow to sink lower. By 1:35 a.m., the crew sealed all watertight doors from the bridge, except for one, door number 10, which the ship's safety officer later found open and closed manually. After discussions with senior officers, the captain chose to return and deliberately beach the ship on a sandbank in Great Bay to prevent further damage and ensure passenger safety. At 1:47 a.m., the general emergency alarm was sounded and passengers and crew were directed to their emergency and lifeboat stations. The ship's public address system provided continuous updates in multiple languages, including Spanish, French, and German. By 2:10 a.m. and 2:15 a.m., lifeboats on both sides of the vessel were ready for boarding. All cabins were confirmed cleared by 2:20 a.m. Finally, at 2:35 a.m., the captain grounded the ship on a sandbar in Great Bay without causing additional harm. All 2,557 passengers were safely evacuated between 2:45 a.m. and 5:15 a.m. with the help of tender boats from shore. Remarkably, there were no serious injuries or loss of life. Investigators from the US Coast Guard and the Maritime Authority concluded that the accident resulted from a series of human errors and leadership failures, particularly surrounding poor adherence to safety protocols and ineffective oversight by the ship's captain. A major issue was the crew's failure to follow the International Safety Management Code's safety management system. This system required ships to use detailed voyage plans, checklists, and continuous position checks through GPS and traditional navigation methods. However, these procedures were largely ignored. The captain openly resisted the ISM code, viewing it as unnecessary bureaucracy. His disregard for the system discouraged the crew from taking it seriously, resulting in missed safety checks and planning failures that could have prevented the grounding. The cruise line that owned Monarch of the Seas was also criticized for poorly implementing the ISM code fleet-wide. The company failed to properly communicate to staff or ensure they understood how to use it. Investigators recommended the company adopt a more hands-on approach, including audits and ship visits by a designated representative to promote and monitor compliance. The captain's failure to properly supervise the navigational watch was another key factor. He didn't ensure the voyage plan was updated to reflect a route change, failed to brief his team on maneuvering strategies, and did not account for environmental factors like wind and current. He also neglected to ensure that hazardous areas such as Proselyte Reef were marked on the navigation charts, which were not even up to date. Overconfidence, combined with physical discomfort and pressure to keep to schedule, likely influenced these lapses. The captain's leadership style further undermined safety. His strong authoritative personality made subordinates hesitant to question his decisions or suggest alternatives. This undermined teamwork and open communication on the bridge, key principles of good bridge resource management. To prevent similar incidents, investigators advised ownership to improve training, implement better oversight systems, and foster a culture that values good communication. This included leadership training for senior officers and better screening to ensure crew members were suitable for team-based operations. Ultimately, the grounding was seen as a systemic failure in safety culture, not just individual negligence. Unfortunately for everyone involved, though, it wasn't enough to prevent further mayhem. On the morning of September 2nd, 2005, the Monarch of the Seas was docked securely in San Pedro, Los Angeles, California, scheduled to depart that afternoon at 17:30. Around 7 a.m. that day, 2 engine room crew members were assigned to replace a section of pipe in the starboard shaft tunnel. Their supervisor, the first engineer, began filling out the necessary hot work permits required in case the job demanded cutting stuck bolts. These permits needed approval from both the company and the US Coast Guard. Shortly before 9 a.m., as the engine crew worked on the pipe, the engine foreman walked past the starboard shaft tunnel and noticed both workers lying motionless on the floor. He immediately called 911 at 8:59, triggering an onboard medical emergency alert 1 minute later. He notified the first engineer, and along with the inventory technical specialist, they returned to the scene. Despite suspecting gas might be involved, all 3 entered the tunnel to help the unconscious men. Meanwhile, hearing the emergency announcement, the ship's electrician and an electrical cadet rushed to the area. The cadet smelled an odd odor and found the first engineer convulsing. He managed to pull him to safety, but collapsed during a second rescue attempt. The electrician, wearing breathing equipment, retrieved the remaining victims just as the medical team arrived. By 9:02, the ship's safety officer had requested a fire and smoke emergency announcement. As the medical team treated the victims, some responders themselves began feeling the effects of the fumes. A temporary treatment area was set up 2 decks above. At 9:12, Port Emergency Services, including the Los Angeles Fire Department and hazardous materials teams, arrived on scene. The area was secured and ventilation shut off. Hazmat crews later measured hydrogen sulfide levels exceeding 300 parts per million, far beyond the safe limit. By 10:36, it was confirmed that 3 crew members had died. The vessel's leadership coordinated with authorities, arranged passenger disembarkation, and halted new boarding. The ship was ordered to remain docked until proven safe. That afternoon, a faulty raw sewage pipe was reconnected by the crew in full protective gear. Testing confirmed the area was gas-free. Most hospitalized crew recovered, though the first engineer suffered a collapsed lung. The investigation revealed that vent hoses meant to drain fumes had been blocked, and prior gas leak incidents had gone unaddressed. Long-term repairs and new safety procedures followed to prevent future tragedies. Unfortunately, the Monarch seemed cursed, as the tragedies just wouldn't stop and the vessel would not slip quietly into maritime obscurity. Whatever shadow had followed the ship from its earliest days refused to lift. On the morning of January 30th, 2006, tragedy struck again. Captain Jon Rene Clausen, just 38 years old, was found dead in his stateroom as the vessel neared Los Angeles at the end of a 3-night cruise to Ensenada. There were no signs of foul play, just another life claimed behind closed doors, another inexplicable entry in a growing log of misfortune. 14 years later, the Monarch found itself trapped in the crosshairs of a global catastrophe. As COVID-19 swept across the globe, the ship became a floating question mark. 1,504 Colombian passengers were stranded off the coast of Panama when their home port of Cartagena closed its doors. With nowhere else to go, they were airlifted home from Colón, Panama, a logistical nightmare born of pandemic panic. But the worst was yet to come. On April 17, 2020, a Honduran crew member was evacuated from the ship after experiencing respiratory distress. He tested positive for the virus and died soon after in a Panama City hospital. The Monarch, once a vessel of leisure and luxury, had become a prison of contagion and fear. By the end of 2020, Pullman tour cruises collapsed under the weight of the pandemic. The Monarch, along with her sister ships Sovereign and Horizon, was placed in cold layup. They were gutted, stripped of anything valuable, and quietly sold for scrap. On July 22, 2020, the Monarch of the Seas was beached in Aliyah, Turkey, and dismantled the following year. At last, the cursed liner was dead. and perhaps, for the first time in its long, ill-starred existence, at peace.